I still remember that moment like it just happened, standing in the middle of the living room, surrounded by family, and feeling completely invisible. It was Christmas Eve last year, and I had brought a homemade pie, the kind I'd spent hours perfecting, hoping to finally earn a smile or even a nod from Mom. Instead, she leaned in just close enough for others to hear and whispered, "Here comes the family disappointment with her sad little gifts." The words cut sharper than I expected, slicing through the holiday cheer like a knife. Jane's smirk from across the table was the final punctuation. The room froze. The laughter that followed felt like it wasn't meant to be kind. I felt my cheeks burn hot, my throat tightening. I wanted to vanish into the floor, to disappear into the shadows where I felt so often left to dwell. I held my pie a little too tight, fingers pressing into the crust, grounding me as panic fluttered up my spine. I could hear the uneasy shifting of relatives, the clinking of cutlery that suddenly seemed too loud. For a moment, I thought about saying something, defending myself, but what could I say? It was easier to swallow the insult, to keep the peace. "Mom's just stressed," I told myself over and over, trying to dull the sting in my chest. But inside, a small seed of doubt took root. Was I really the disappointment? The years of silence, the invisible burdens suddenly flashed before my eyes. The unpaid bills, the endless hospital runs for Dad, the paperwork I handled silently. All of it seemed to vanish in that one cruel sentence. I excused myself early that night, leaving my slice of pie untouched on my plate. The quiet retreat to the living room felt like a tiny act of rebellion, a whispered refusal to be erased. Daniel, sensing the storm inside me, reached out with a gentle squeeze of my hand. "You're not invisible to me," he said softly, but the words couldn't fill the hollow ache. Still, I clung to hope, fragile and trembling, that this was a one-time slip, a moment of exhaustion from a family I loved despite everything. I wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. Jane's shadow loomed larger every year, her charm a sharp contrast to my quiet diligence. But beneath that simmering shame, something deeper stirred, a quiet power I held but never used, the house title in my name, the mortgage I'd paid for years, the unseen foundation I built under this family's cracks. That night, as I stared out the window at the snowy street, I whispered to myself, maybe, just maybe, things could change. I am Patricia Gordon. I've been the family's invisible backbone for as long as I can remember, driving bills to the mailbox, coordinating repairs nobody else wants to think about, and juggling endless legal forms at my job as a paralegal specializing in real estate law. For 12 years, I've carried this weight silently, the responsible one who always shows up, the one who fixes what's broken without asking for credit. Every month, I'm the quiet force balancing the chaos while Jane, my older sister by 2 years, basks in the spotlight as the golden child our parents adore. Mom still brags about Jane's charm and supposed success, while I'm introduced as the family disappointment, like clockwork at every gathering. It burns every time, yet I still hold on to hope that someday they'll see me for more than just the background noise. Jane has a way of making me feel smaller, like I'm fading into the wallpaper no matter how much I accomplish. But I have my own secret, a quiet strength they don't know about, legal ownership of our family home. For 5 years, I've been the one paying the mortgage, the one keeping this house afloat when Jane and our parents faltered. No one else knows that, not even Jane. I've never used that power. I've believed family should be about loyalty, love, and trust, not contracts or ownership papers. But lately, that belief feels like a fragile thread stretched too thin. There's a growing unease inside me, a whisper that the status quo won't hold forever. Something beneath this fragile piece is shifting, and I'm not sure what it will bring. I remember one Christmas when I was 12, the moment I first understood the uneven scales of my family. Dinner was in full swing, and Jane had just unwrapped a shiny new bicycle, her eyes sparkling, the room buzzing with praise. Meanwhile, I held a worn secondhand book, the pages creased and faded. Mom's words rang out casually. "Jane is destined for great things, Patricia. You just need to find your place." That phrase echoed in my mind for years, a chilling reminder that I was always the lesser one. My good grades, my part-time jobs, all brushed aside while Jane's every achievement was celebrated like gold. I told myself it was tough love, that maybe Jane needed encouragement more, but it wasn't encouragement. It was favoritism, plain and painful. One memory still replays in my head. I came home from college glowing with news about a promotion at my internship. I expected Mom to smile, maybe ask questions. Instead, she barely glanced up from her knitting. Jane, on the other hand, got a celebration dinner with Dad, balloons, and a card signed by everyone. That night lodged deep inside me, the sting of knowing no matter how hard I tried, I'd always be less than. Our family's foundation was built on uneven scales, with me weighed down by silence and neglect. I learned early how to quiet myself, to stay small and invisible so as not to provoke more disappointment. Over the years, I made sacrifices no one ever thanked me for. For 5 years, I quietly shouldered the family home's $1,800 monthly mortgage, even when Jane and my parents struggled with other bills. Twice I canceled vacations I'd planned with Daniel just to cover urgent repairs. A broken furnace in the dead of winter, a leaking roof last summer that threatened the whole house. I passed up promotions that meant relocating because I didn't want to abandon the fragile threads holding our family together. Meanwhile, Jane lived lavishly, smiling like she'd earned everything, with parents' money padding her lifestyle. It was painful to watch, but I told myself I was the responsible one, the backbone. Daniel has always been my anchor through the storms. "Why do you keep giving so much and getting nothing in return?" he asked gently, frustration and worry lining his voice. I don't have a good answer. I still hope for recognition, Mom to see me as more than the disappointment. But deep inside, the truth is clear. I'm the one who carries this family in silence. The house title is in my name, a quiet security, a secret I've never wanted to wield as a weapon. Maybe I'm just waiting for the right moment to show that strength. Or maybe I'm too loyal to break the fragile peace we pretend to maintain. Every time I think about all I've done, all I've sacrificed, it makes the sting of being overlooked even sharper. I've been the silent provider, and yet my family treats me like I'm nothing. But even in the quiet, I have power, and I'm beginning to wonder if it's time to stop hiding it, to stop being the invisible one. The first time I truly felt the weight of my family's cruelty wasn't subtle. It was a sharp, public humiliation that echoed in my mind long after the moment passed. It happened last Christmas, a night that was supposed to be warm and joyful, but instead left me reeling. I arrived carrying a homemade pie, my small contribution to the holiday table, hoping it might soften the usual tension. Instead, Mom's voice cut through the chatter like ice. She leaned over just enough for others to hear and said, "Here comes the family disappointment with her sad little gifts." The words were loud, deliberate, and filled with a venom I hadn't expected. Jane's smirk across the room was a silent confirmation, their private joke at my expense. The room stiffened as relatives exchanged uncomfortable glances. Some laughed nervously, others looked away. Heat flooded my face, the knot in my chest tightening until it felt like I couldn't breathe. I gripped the pie tighter, trying to steady myself. I wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor and escape the sharp judgment swirling around me. But all I could do was force a smile, nod as if it didn't matter, and retreat from the table earlier than usual. Sitting alone in the living room, I fought back tears I didn't want anyone to see. "Mom's just stressed," I whispered to myself, desperately seeking a reason that would make sense. But the words felt hollow, and the sting in my heart was real and deep. Daniel found me there, silent and withdrawn, and offered a gentle touch. "You don't deserve that," he said softly, his voice steady and kind. It was a small moment of comfort in the storm, but even that couldn't shake the humiliation. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just invisible. I was being actively erased. Still, I told myself it was a one-time thing, a cruel slip in an otherwise normal family dynamic. I wasn't ready to give up on them, on us. But the seed of doubt had been planted. I started to wonder how much longer I could keep carrying this weight without breaking, or without showing the power I held quietly in my hands. For now, I stayed silent, nursing the sting and the small, fierce flame of defiance growing inside me. This family may see me as a disappointment, but I knew I was something else entirely. Jane didn't waste any time after I showed that small flicker of resistance. Within days, the atmosphere around me shifted, growing colder and heavier, like the air thickened with whispered accusations. I started hearing snatches of cruel comments wherever I went. "Patricia's just too sensitive," or "she's always blowing things out of proportion." These weren't just casual remarks. They felt calculated, designed to erode my confidence. What stung worst was the way distant cousins and in-laws, people I barely knew, suddenly took Jane's side, acting as flying monkeys enforcing her narrative. I caught them giving me pointed looks, then leaning over to remind me, "You need to stop making waves," or "Maybe you're just being difficult." Jane's subtle rumors crept into conversations. I was selfish, ungrateful, even petty. I could see the doubt flicker in Mom's eyes when she glanced my way, a shadow of suspicion that hadn't been there before. Helen, usually my quiet ally, told me one night, "You've always misunderstood Jane's kindness, Patricia. Maybe you're expecting too much." Those words felt like a slap wrapped in a sigh of disappointment. Robert simply shrugged off my concerns with a dismissive wave, as if I was exaggerating something trivial. The subtle gaslighting was relentless. I found myself second-guessing every interaction, every feeling. Was I really the problem? Had I misread their intentions all along? Daniel tried to hold my truth steady. "Don't let them turn you against yourself," he urged, his voice firm but gentle. But the doubt gnawed at me, like a persistent itch under my skin that I couldn't scratch. The family dynamic gradually tightened around me, isolating me from those I thought were safe. Jane's web was spun perfectly. I was the outsider now, the one everyone quietly agreed was too fragile, too sensitive, too much trouble. Resistance felt dangerous, like poking a hornet's nest that Jane guarded jealously. She was unmistakably clear. Any challenge to her favored position would not be tolerated. Each day, I felt smaller, like my very existence became more invisible, more disregarded. The warmth that had once flickered in my chest when I thought about family was replaced by a cold knot of fear and exhaustion. I was fighting a war no one else seemed to see, and it was wearing me down. Yet, beneath the crushing weight of doubt and rejection, a quiet voice inside me whispered that I wasn't losing because I was weak. I was surrounded by a family who chose to look away. And that realization, painful as it was, stirred something fierce and unyielding. Thinking I had to break this cycle, I decided to face the storm head-on, hoping for peace. I arranged a family meeting, a calm sit-down with Jane and our parents, determined to speak honestly, to lay bare the truth I carried alone. I spoke carefully, trying to avoid blame, focusing on facts, the years I'd contributed financially, the quiet sacrifices nobody saw, the loneliness born from being dismissed. "I don't want to fight," I said. "I just want respect and fairness, recognition for what I do, for who I am." My voice was steady, but inside my heart pounded with hope and fear. Jane's response was a performance I didn't expect but should have seen coming. Tears welled up in her eyes, her voice cracking as she claimed victimhood. "You don't understand what I've been through," she insisted, her words dripping with false vulnerability. Then came the thinly veiled threat. If I pushed further, I'd destroy the family. I looked at Mom and Dad, hoping for support, but Helen and Robert quickly sided with Jane, dismissing me as exaggerated and over-emotional. Even the family friend we'd invited to mediate seemed to quietly urge me to let it go for peace. The room turned cold. The air thickened with judgment and dismissal. I left that meeting feeling smaller than when I entered, my hope crumbling like dry earth beneath my feet. The peaceful path I'd sought was closed to me, barricaded by lies and alliances I couldn't break. I realized then, with a bitter clarity, that I was alone in this battle. The family system was rigged to protect Jane, to maintain her golden child status at my expense. I clenched my fists in the car, the silence around me oppressive, my dreams of reconciliation fading into a distant, unreachable place. The weight of isolation pressed down, but beneath it, a stubborn ember refused to die. Months later, the cruelty Jane unleashed wasn't just whispered or behind closed doors. It struck loudly and publicly. At a work event packed with colleagues, Jane cornered me with a sharpness that shocked even Daniel. She spat out my secret like venom, revealing my financial struggles that I'd confided in her years ago. "Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with money, you wouldn't be so alone," she sneered, loud enough for several people to hear. The hush that fell was suffocating. I felt every pair of eyes on me, judgment settling like a physical weight. I could see Daniel's jaw tighten, his fists clenched in silent fury. The humiliation wasn't confined to the moment. It threatened my professional reputation, a place where I'd built my identity beyond the family's shadow. Rumors began to spread in the office, casting me as greedy and unstable. It was a blow that cut deeper than insults. Jane's calculated cruelty reached into my livelihood, aiming to dismantle everything I had worked so hard to protect. The family's favoritism felt like an invisible noose tightening around my neck. This wasn't an accident or misunderstanding. It was intentional, a weapon forged from years of manipulation meant to isolate and discredit me. The sting seeped into every facet of my life, shaking my confidence and making the future look uncertain and fragile. Despite the mounting damage, I tried one last time to reach across the chasm between Jane and me. I sent her a message, simple and clear, offering forgiveness and seeking truce. "I need respect, not conflict," I wrote cautiously. "Let's find a way forward. I want to help you with your struggles, not add to them." It was a vulnerable offer, the kind that risked exposing the cracks in my armor. Maybe, I hoped she'd surprise me. Maybe she'd accept an olive branch instead of shattering it. But Jane's rejection was cold and merciless. She accused me of trying to control her, twisting my offer into a weapon against me. At the family Mother's Day brunch, she publicly mocked my attempt, turning my vulnerability into a spectacle for everyone to see. The laughter that followed was sharp and cruel, slicing through the fragile hope I'd nurtured. In that moment, the last thread of my patience snapped. I understood, with aching clarity, that I had exhausted every peaceful avenue. Jane had no intention of changing or acknowledging my pain. The path forward was no longer about forgiveness. It was about survival, and finally reclaiming my voice, no matter the cost. The aftermath of that family meeting was more brutal than I ever imagined. Jane twisted my goodwill into a weapon, painting me as manipulative and unstable. It was as if every ounce of kindness I'd extended was just another thread in her web to trap me. Slowly, more family members shifted their allegiance. Helen's once quiet support dissolved into open siding with Jane, her words laced with pity and judgment. "You're just too sensitive, Patricia." Even Robert, who usually stayed neutral, kept his distance, offering nothing but silence. The rooms in our family home felt colder, the atmosphere thick with unspoken accusations. I was isolated, a ghost drifting through gatherings where my presence was barely acknowledged. Daniel remained my anchor, his steady support the only light in the growing darkness. But even his presence couldn't shield me from the suffocating weight of exclusion. Each day, I felt the walls closing in tighter, the whispers growing louder in their absence of outright confrontation. Doubt crept in like a relentless shadow. Maybe I was the problem after all. The phrase echoed in my mind, cruel and persistent. Maybe I am the problem. I wrestled with exhaustion so deep it felt physical, not just emotional. My throat tightened at the thought of how much I'd given, how little I was seen. I mourned the family I thought I had, a place of warmth and understanding. But that morning was tinged with a strange, nascent resolve. Beneath the haze of confusion and pain, a flicker of something new started to grow. It wasn't hope in their recognition anymore. I knew that was a dead end. Instead, it was about survival. I realized I could no longer exist as the invisible caretaker, the one who bore the weight silently while being crushed beneath it. This was about reclaiming control, about making sure that at the very least I wasn't erased. The old me, the one who hoped for peace at any cost, faded slowly, replaced by a quiet, simmering resolve. I could feel it in my bones. The breaking point was near. Something inside me was shifting, hardening into a steel edge I hadn't known I possessed. Then, the breaking point arrived unannounced, stripping away all illusions in one brutal moment. While sorting through the mortgage paperwork, something I often handled quietly, I discovered the shock. Jane had secretly taken out a second mortgage on the family home. Not a small one either, $320,000. Debt we hadn't agreed to. Debt I hadn't even been told about. Worse, the signatures on those papers weren't hers. They were forged. My hands trembled as I held the documents, the weight of betrayal crushing me. The house, the home I'd fought so hard to preserve, was now a ticking time bomb of financial ruin. I confronted her at dinner, the room thick with tension. Our parents sat across from us, their expressions unreadable as I laid out the truth. Jane's response was ice-cold and unapologetic. She admitted everything with a smirk, like she'd won some twisted victory. Mom's face hardened, a sudden chill falling over the table. "Patricia, you've been irresponsible holding the house," she declared, her voice sharp and final. "We're freezing your access." My heart plummeted. The bank was threatening foreclosure. The house was in jeopardy. Daniel's steady gaze met mine, and I saw our cousin's shocked expression across the room, witnesses to the unraveling of everything I'd tried to protect. In that moment, something inside me didn't break. It snapped, but into a cold clarity rather than rage. The veil I'd worn for years lifted all at once. I saw Jane for what she was, not just entitled and manipulative, but outright willing to destroy the home I'd safeguarded to keep her golden child status intact. My hope for family approval died silently at that table. What rose from the ashes was something harsher, sharper, and utterly relentless. This wasn't mere betrayal anymore. It was war, and I was no longer a bystander. The lines were drawn, and I could feel the shift deep within me, a ruthless clarity that burned away doubt and exhaustion alike. That night, in the suffocating quiet of our bedroom, the weight of years crashed down on me. I replayed every sacrifice, every cruel word, every dismissal that had chipped away at my spirit. The pain was raw, stabbing through the calm facade I'd maintained for so long. But beneath that pain, a fierce, burning anger began to rise. It wasn't the desperate anger of the hurt. It was something sharper, colder. I saw the pattern clearly now. Jane's entitlement, our parents' blindness, the cycle of manipulation I'd been trapped in. I wasn't the problem. I was the solution. The anger transformed my grief into determination. It sharpened my focus, turning the swirling confusion in my mind into a laser beam of intent. I realized the power I held. Quiet, legal, and undeniable. The house was in my name. Jane's reckless decisions endangered not only the family home but herself. That reckless debt was my leverage. I swore under my breath, a vow that echoed in the darkness. Never again. No more silent suffering. No more being the family's scapegoat. I would wield every legal tool at my disposal, not in blind revenge, but to demand respect and justice. For the first time, I embraced my power fully, not as a weapon of destruction, but as a shield to protect myself and what was rightfully mine. Morning came with the clarity of purpose that had eluded me for so long. Sitting across from Daniel at the kitchen table, I outlined my plan with a steadiness I barely recognized in my own voice. Jane's secret debt has put the house at risk, I began, feeling the weight of the truth settle between us. It's time to stop pretending family loyalty is enough. I'm going to protect what's mine, legally and strategically. Daniel nodded, his eyes clear but cautious. We'll need a lawyer, someone who understands family and property law. We talked through the first steps. The main target was Jane herself. She'd manipulated everyone and endangered the home. It was time she faced the consequences. My first move was to gather every relevant document, every piece of evidence. I'd consult a trusted attorney who could guide me through the legal maze ahead. This wasn't about burning bridges or inflicting emotional wounds. It was about leveling the playing field. Jane had been playing with power for years. I was done letting her win by default. Daniel's presence steadied me, reminding me this was no longer a solo mission. We were partners in this fight, and that made a difference. The clarity I felt wasn't just about strategy, it was about reclaiming my dignity and my voice. It was the beginning of a new chapter, not one of silence or surrender, but one of calculated action, cold resolve, and unshakable strength. We would move methodically, using the law as both shield and sword. I felt the first stirrings of hope, not hope for forgiveness, but hope for justice, for respect, and for finally being seen. I sat at the kitchen table, the scattered pile of documents feeling heavier than their weight in paper, mortgage statements stretching back 5 years, payment records showing every cent I'd contributed, $108,000 in total, each figure a silent testament to the sacrifices I'd made. I traced my finger along the faded signatures, the ones that weren't mine, but now were part of this story because Jane had forged them. My hands trembled, the betrayal raw and sharp, but beneath it all, an unyielding resolve began to take shape. The emotional dependencies were just as clear. Mom and Dad leaned on me for everything. From managing bills to navigating legal matters none of them understood. I held the house deeds, the contracts, the payment histories. Without me, the fragile system keeping this family afloat would collapse. Even Jane, with all her manipulation, depended on the stability I provided in ways she never acknowledged. It was a bitter truth. The family needed me more than I needed them. Daniel sat beside me as I consulted with the lawyer we'd retained, a steady presence reminding me I wasn't alone. The attorney's voice was calm but firm, outlining the legal breaches Jane had committed, especially the forged signatures on the second mortgage and multiple credit applications. "This isn't just a family squabble," he said. "It's fraud, and it's a serious one." Hearing it put into words was both terrifying and empowering. Jane's secret debts weren't just a vulnerability. They were leverage, a weapon I could wield to finally demand accountability. I began to map every pressure point, every dependency Jane and the family had on me. If I withdrew support, if I legally challenged her claims, the fallout would be devastating. It wasn't a game to me. It was survival. I scribbled notes in my worn notebook, detailing each vulnerability like a strategist planning a battle. This wasn't obsession, it was necessity. The power was shifting, and I was ready to take control. The cold clarity in my mind was the first spark of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. "I'm not just fighting for myself anymore," I told Daniel quietly. "I'm fighting for the truth, and for the home." His nod was slow but sure, mirroring the unspoken promise between us. The family had underestimated me for too long. Now, I was no longer invisible. I was dangerous. Behind the smiles and calm words I wore like armor, the real work was happening in silence. Late into the night, I changed the passwords on every family account, updated power of attorney documents, and secured property deeds in my name alone. The bank was notified. Alerts sent about potential fraud and unauthorized loans. I requested freezes on any new credit or mortgages against the house without my explicit approval. Every precaution was a shield, every locked door a boundary I would not let Jane cross again. Around the family, I maintained the facade of the quiet, compliant sister. Conversations at dinner stayed neutral. My smiles rehearsed and steady. Jane's eyes flicked to me, searching for cracks, but found none. To them, I was still the same Patricia who took care of the bills, handled the paperwork, and kept the family running. They had no idea the storm gathering beneath the surface. Daniel and I met with the attorney regularly, going over every document, every clause, every loophole. We planned each move meticulously. No rash decisions, no emotional outbursts. This was the calm before the storm, and I was the eye of it. Inside, I felt like a tightly wound spring, every moment bringing me closer to the moment of reckoning. The tension was thick, but in that tension was focus. Jane wouldn't see this coming. "I feel like I'm walking on a knife's edge," I confessed to Daniel one evening, voice low. "But no matter what happens, I have to stay composed. For me." His hand found mine across the table, grounding me in the silence. The family believed I was still their quiet caretaker, but I was no longer the one who would silently suffer. Soon, everything would change. The discovery came when I least expected it, turning the whole game on its head. While reviewing Jane's financial records with our lawyer, a cold dread settled in my chest. More than $320,000 in secret debt, loans, credit lines, all taken out in my name without any authorization. Not only that, but forged signatures appeared on several credit applications, not just the second mortgage. My breath hitched as I realized the full extent of her deception. This wasn't just reckless. It was catastrophic. The crushing weight of that hidden debt explained Jane's years of temporary setbacks, the frantic calls for money, the half-truths she whispered to cover it all up. Worse, it meant the entire family home, our sanctuary, was a ticking time bomb. The parents, blinded by their favoritism, had no idea. Their trust in Jane was a liability none of us could afford. Sitting across from Jane, I laid out the evidence in a quiet voice, trying to mask the storm raging inside me. Her cold smirk faltered for a second, replaced by something darker, more venomous. "You'll regret this," she snarled, eyes flashing with a fury that only confirmed her guilt. But I felt no fear, only an urgent clarity. This wasn't just about justice, it was about survival. The house was at risk, the family's future teetering on the edge, and Jane's deceit was the root cause. "I'm not here to destroy you," I said steadily. "I'm here to protect what's ours, and that means facing the truth." The weight of those words hung heavy in the air. The game had changed, and now I held the winning hand. With the truth in my grasp, I moved swiftly but quietly. I formally notified the bank and creditors about the fraud and unauthorized debts, ensuring they knew the full extent of the situation. I stopped all mortgage payments immediately, withdrawing the financial support I'd provided for years. The silence was deafening as the first dominoes began to fall. The bank was forced to initiate foreclosure proceedings. Jane's facade began to crack as creditors called relentlessly. Her usual confidence faltered, replaced by panic and desperation. Bank accounts froze, credit lines denied, legal pressures mounting like a storm on the horizon. Yet I kept my composure, neither gloating nor revealing my full hand. This was only the first move in a larger game. Daniel watched my transformation with quiet awe, how I shifted from the weary caretaker to a calm, methodical strategist. My withdrawal was deliberate, signaling an end to silent sacrifice. Jane's carefully constructed empire was cracking, and the family was completely unprepared. The tension in the house was palpable, though none dared speak of it openly. "This is just the beginning," I whispered to Daniel one night as we reviewed the next steps. No drama, no public scenes, just precise legal maneuvers that would force Jane and everyone else to confront the consequences of years of deceit. I wasn't seeking revenge, I was claiming justice, and the reckoning had only just begun. The family meeting was tense before I even stepped through the door. Helen had called us all together. Sensing the storm that was about to break, I carried a thick folder, the culmination of months of quiet work, legal documents laying bare everything Jane had tried to hide. The air felt charged, a mixture of dread and anticipation settling like a heavy cloak around me. When I stood before them, my voice was calm but resolute. Jane has been hiding over $320,000 in debt, including forged documents in my name. The bank is foreclosing on the house because of this. Silence fell like a stone. Jane's usual smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of panic she tried to mask. Her lips pressed into a thin line, eyes darting, searching for an escape that didn't exist. Daniel stood silently beside me, his quiet support grounding me as the family absorbed the shock. I caught Helen's eyes. There was hurt, confusion, but also a long overdue recognition of the truth. Some relatives exchanged glances, their earlier blind loyalty cracking under the weight of the revelation. I pressed on, drawing from the well of a new strength. From this moment, I will no longer enable this behavior. The house is legally mine, and I will protect it. Jane must face the consequences of her actions. The room shifted. The unspoken hierarchy that had protected Jane for years crumbled visibly. I wasn't the ignored sibling anymore. I was the one taking control, the one wielding undeniable proof. Jane's posture crumbled, shoulders sagging under the weight of exposure. The family's protective shield around her shattered in that moment. For years, she'd thrived behind a veil of charm and entitlement. But now, I saw the raw desperation beneath it. I didn't raise my voice or plead. I let the facts do the work. The power had shifted, and I felt it surge through me like a quiet but undeniable victory. This was my moment, the moment where silence turned into strength, and truth became my weapon. The fallout was swift and unforgiving. Jane's world began to unravel in the harsh light of reality. Creditors lined up at her door, her bank accounts froze, and legal notices flooded in. The threat of foreclosure loomed over the family home like a dark cloud. Desperation crept into Jane's calls. Pleas, apologies, promises that rang hollow. But I held firm, my boundaries drawn with unyielding clarity. I refused to be manipulated by tears or false remorse. Other family members, shaken by the revelation, started to approach me quietly. Some offered hesitant apologies for their blindness, their voices laced with regret and newfound understanding. Helen, wounded but resolute, began to distance herself from Jane's denials, her eyes finally opening to the truth she had long avoided. Robert remained silent, but less dismissive, his stance a subtle shift in an otherwise fractured loyalty. The family dynamic changed, teetering on the edge of a new, uneasy equilibrium, where silence and denial could no longer shield the lies. Throughout it all, I kept my composure. I was no longer the sacrificial lamb. I was the protector of what was rightfully mine. The legal moves I made were calculated and measured, ensuring that Jane faced consequences without resorting to cruelty or vengeance. The quiet enforcement of truth became my armor, a shield that kept me steady amid the chaos. The checkmate was real and just, the final word on a long and painful chapter. Jane's desperation deepened as her attempts at damage control spiraled into frenzy. She threatened legal action against me, accusing me of tearing the family apart. Her public declarations of victimhood became a twisted symphony of lies, designed to rally support and confuse the narrative. She even tried to intimidate Daniel, warning him to stay out of family affairs. But none of it worked. I was prepared for every move, backed by legal counsel who dismantled her threats with precision. My refusal to engage emotionally left Jane isolated and exposed. The family, once mesmerized by her charm, saw the cracks in her facade. Some relatives who had once believed her lies began to approach me apologetically, offering sincere gestures of reconciliation. I accepted a few but kept clear boundaries. This wasn't about rebuilding broken trust, but about protecting my peace and my home. Jane's confidence shattered, replaced by a hollow desperation. Her final attempts at control failed spectacularly, sealing her fall from grace. The family was fractured, yes, but for the first time, it was fractured with honesty, not illusion. I stood firm at the center of it all, not as a destroyer, but as someone reclaiming respect and dignity. I wasn't seeking to break Jane. I was determined to protect what was mine and assert the truth. 6 months have passed since that day. I no longer dread the family gatherings that once felt like battlegrounds. The house, under my name alone, stands safe. Foreclosure averted through careful legal restructuring. Jane still struggles with the consequences she brought upon herself, but the family's delusions have crumbled. The once impenetrable wall of favoritism has cracked, replaced by a cautious, uneasy honesty. Daniel and I are closer than ever, bonded by the battles we fought and won together. We've built boundaries that protect our peace, boundaries I never thought I could enforce before. I no longer feel the crushing obligation to sacrifice myself for approval that was never truly offered. I've learned that respect isn't given freely. It's demanded and fiercely guarded. My relationship with my parents remains distant but honest. Helen and Robert have begun to see me as more than the disappointment they once dismissed. I keep contact with them limited, just enough to acknowledge family ties but firm enough to prevent old patterns from creeping back in. There's no bitterness in me, only a quiet sense of triumph. For years, I was the silent caregiver, the background figure whose sacrifices went unseen. Now I hold the keys, literally and figuratively. This house is more than just walls and a roof. It's a symbol of my resilience, my worth, and the strength I found when I stopped hiding. The future feels open, full of possibility. I get to choose what family means to me now, on my terms. And that freedom, finally earned and fiercely protected, is worth more than any approval I ever chased.